Thanks for downloading a 3CR podcast. 3CR is an independent community radio station based in Melbourne, Australia. We need your financial support to keep going. Go to www.3cr.org.au for more information and to donate online. Now stay tuned for your 3CR podcast.
Hello and welcome to Lost in Science for another week. We are here for you with all the science you can handle, a half an hour on your radio, so strap in. My name is Claire, and this week on the show I'm of course joined by Chris and Stu.
Hello.
Hi.
And Chris, I know you've got quite a tale for us this week, quite a science tale. It's a creature feature as well. You know, they're my favourite.
It is. This story, I had to cover it. I saw a write-up on this story, and it caught my attention because it is about giant carnivorous centipedes on Phillip Island that eat seabirds.
Wait, what? That seems to go against the laws of nature.
Well, this is the thing. This is the thing that is kind of interesting, is why are we so grossed out by the idea of invertebrates eating vertebrates? I don't have an answer for that, but it just seems wrong.
It's just one step closer to eating us. I think it's just that primordial fear.
Look, the only good news I can give you here is that I was alarmed by this story until I found out that the Phillip Island in question is not the Phillip Island in Victoria. It's the Phillip Island in the Norfolk Island chain. So, fortunately, these centipedes are a bit of a distance away.
They're a little bit further than...
tell you how relieved I was to find that out. But
I cannot wait to hear more about these centipedes. Yeah. Oh, amazing. And Stu, what do you have for us this week?
Well, speaking of creatures, I have a story about everyone's favourite spider, the daddy longlegs.
Oh, are you going to be busting the myth?
Oh, look, I'm going to zip over that myth so quick you won't even notice.
Okay.
But I'm actually talking about daddy longlegs, not the ones that we in Australia call daddy longlegs, but a completely different species of critters called daddy longlegs. And I'll explain, they're not exactly spiders, they're kind of related, but they're not really spiders. But people did some work on why do they have long legs and what are the genes that control them getting long legs. So I've got a little bit of a story about that. But there's a whole lot of stuff about daddy long legs in there. So, you know, I reckon they're all right. As spiders go, they're one of my least worrisome spiders.
That's right.
Not like giant aquatic centipedes that eat seabirds.
Well, I mean, I'm just glad that we've got both sides of the invertebrate fence here. We've got the lovable and the terrifying here on Lost in Science for our double invertebrate creature feature. So, on with the show.
yes, you're listening to Lost in Science, and I'm talking about, well, particular invertebrates eating vertebrates, I suppose, which, as I said, is something that, for some reason, it just seems really gross, but it's not something that we're entirely unfamiliar with. Like, Stu's going to talk to us about some spiders later on, but I don't know if you remember.
There's a bird-eating spider, isn't there?
Well, there is. There is a spider called the bird-eating spider. The Goliath bird-eating spider of South America is one of the world's biggest spiders. It doesn't eat that many birds, but it sometimes eats birds. So I guess that counts.
Okay.
Look, sometimes is more times than most people would like to consider, I think.
There is an Australian bird-eating spider, or it's called a bird-eating spider. It is Selenocosmia crassipes. I don't know if I pronounced that right. Also known as the Queensland whistling tarantula, because it kind of produces a hissing noise.
A hissing noise. I mean, I thought that was quite charming.
Doesn't nonchalantly hide in its web, looking inconspicuous until a bird happens along.
Nothing going on here. Look, apparently it's a nocturnal spider, lives on the ground, probably doesn't actually encounter that many birds. I think it's just called that because it is a large spider. But it does eat other vertebrates. It does eat like geckos, skinks, and frogs, among other insects and things.
Right.
So that kind of counts, I suppose. Yeah.
Of course it does.
But yeah, look, there are a few other kind of, insects and other species that have been known to feed on larger kind of vertebrate species. But some of the most notable are centipedes, in fact. There is a genus of centipede, the Scolopendra, and I think the biggest one is Scolopendra gigantea or something like that, lives in South America, and it's known for preying on bats. There was a David Attenborough TV show episode where they got footage of these centipedes preying on bats, and what they do is they kind of climb up the cave wall and hang from the ceiling, and as the bat flies past, they grab it, and they have like powerful venom in their fangs. Well, they're not real fangs, actually forcipules. They're like front legs that have been turned into kind of fangs. But and they pick them out of the air as they fly past.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a bit of a worry. But look, the ones I'm going to talk about are the subject of a recent study that it was in the journal The American Naturalist, but they are on kind of Australian territory, the Phillip Island, which, as I said, is part of the Norfolk Island chain. And these centipedes, they are, what are they called? It's the Phillip Island centipede. The species name is Cormocephalus coinii. And yeah, they're a fairly large centipede, and they've been found to prey on seabirds.
Hang on, I have a question. So you say they're big centipedes, but how big are we talking here? Are they like 5, 10, 15 centimetres?
Well, they're a centipede, so obviously they're going to be 100 feet long.
100 feet.
It's the way I deliver it that works. No, they're actually that's not entirely true. They are large. These ones are about a foot long. But they only have, I counted some pictures of them, they have about 36 legs rather than 100 legs. So,
36 pairs of legs?
Well, 18 pairs.
18 pairs, right, okay.
Yeah, 18 pairs of legs.
Yeah, okay. It's big.
Yeah, but anyway, so yeah, these are, they're also kind of nocturnal predators. They kind of, just kind of roam around on the forest floor. They also have their venomous forcipules, and they basically kind of roam around through seabird burrows, and they seem to pick off the chicks in the burrows. I've seen some footage of it. It is a disturbing thing to see a centipede attacking a fluffy little chick. But these chicks they're a burrowing bird. They are the black-winged petrel, which is Pterodroma nigripennis. And yeah, so the researchers on Phillip Island basically discovered that they were being preyed on by these particular centipedes. And so they kind of set out to investigate how often that was happening. They followed centipedes around. They monitored. They put cameras next to the seabird burrows to watch them. And yeah, and they started to see, they actually caught them on film, and they found, when they found killed chicks, they found there were consistent injury patterns from the centipedes attacking them.
Wow. So that it's a big part of centipede diet? Baby
It
bird.
is a big part of centipedes.
Or is it at certain times of year, I guess, when the birds are...
Well, when they're nesting, yeah. They eat other things. Well, they eat whatever they can. You know, they also will eat things like geckos and skinks. They even apparently sometimes even eat fish that have been dropped by other seabirds. So they don't actually go fishing. They just catch them. But look, it sounds really disturbing, but it is part of the beautiful sort of cycle of nature, I suppose. So they calculated how many chicks these centipedes would be eating, and they reckon it's between about 2,100 and 3,700 chicks each year, which sounds like a lot, but there are up to 19,000 breeding pairs of these black-winged petrels on the island, so they can quite easily handle this. Essentially, what it looks like is that the centipedes are essentially they're obviously part of the natural ecosystem, and they're forming the role of what might be mammals or even snakes, I suppose, would be happening in a similar kind of environment. But those species aren't there, and in fact, although they were there, this is the interesting thing. So this centipede was only really described as a species in 1984, and they only found at the time a few very small individuals of these centipedes. And because there are a lot of pests on the island, there were like pigs and goats and rabbits and various other invasive pests, so those were all removed and allowed the centipedes to come back and allowed the seabirds to return as well. Particularly these black-winged petrels came to the island. Look, they looked for bones, kind of dug for bones in the soil to see if there is a history of this, and they found different kind of bird bones from different species that indicates that perhaps the centipedes were feeding on different species back in the past. But the petrels, these ones seem to be a fairly newcomer to the island, but they've established themselves and they've enabled the centipede to come back to a large population and to a larger size than they were initially. So, look, it sounds disturbing, and it sounds like somewhere you don't necessarily want to hang out, but I mean, it's good for nature, I guess. Just don't go to Phillip Island, this particular Phillip Island, and expect to be safe from the killer centipedes.
Lots of people are spending a lot more time at home lately in many parts of the country, and possibly finding out more about who they share their houses with than they would necessarily like.
Yeah. Are you talking about my cat? Because I've learnt a lot about her over the past 18 months, and I don't like all of it.
How much she actually gets away with sleeping.
Yeah.
Look, I'm not necessarily talking about the pets or family members or housemates or partners. I'm actually talking about the other creatures who might inhabit our constructed environments. And one of the most common animals found in most homes are spiders of many different types, and many of which wander inside by mistake, like huntsmen who don't really want to be there. And if you get them outside, they usually thank you by not coming back in again. But some of them make their permanent home in our home. And the spiders we in Australia call daddy longlegs spiders are one such creature who will find a cosy environment in our houses and stick around, mostly staying out of our way. We don't really see them unless you're sort of moving stuff around in dusty corners or whatever, which a lot of people are doing because they are home. Now, the daddy longlegs we get are carnivores, and they prey on insects as well as other spiders. But despite the urban legends, they do not have the most potent venom of any spider. In fact, their venom is pretty mild by all accounts, although if they do manage to actually pierce your skin, it will hurt. Don't worry about that. But it won't kill you, and it certainly isn't as bad as some other spiders out there. Now, that spider that we find is called Phocis phalangioides, and the phalangioides is a name which it gets because it looks like something else, which is not the spider that we get here, and I'll come to that in a minute. They're not actually native to Australia. These spiders that we get, the daddy longlegs, were actually introduced from Europe accidentally, probably came over in shipping containers with, furniture and stuff from houses in other parts of the world.
Oh.
But they got the name daddy longlegs. In the UK, they call daddy longlegs is a kind of crane fly, which has nothing to do with spiders. Got similarly elongated limbs. But in other parts of the world, a different group of arachnids has this name, daddy longlegs. And they're also called harvestmen spiders. And this is a huge group with 6,650 named species, possibly up to 10,000 species altogether in the world of these harvestmen. They mostly have the same long, gangly legs, so the common name is pretty accurate. Although daddy longlegs, probably misgendering some of them at least, they are not actually spiders. So calling them daddy longlegs spiders overseas is not something we should be doing.
Right, but the ones here are definitely spiders.
The ones here are spiders. They're not Australian spiders, but they are spiders. So the Opiliones, as the order is known, have a distinctly different body type from spiders. They have only a single fused body segment, unlike spiders, which have a separate abdomen and cephalothorax. Also, the Opiliones only have 2 eyes. So spiders have 3 or 4 pairs of eyes.
Yeah.
But these guys have only got 2. I'm sure the other spiders gang up and go, haha, 2 eyes.
So are they insects or are they spiders?
No, they have 8 legs, so they're arachnids.
Okay, they have 8 legs.
But the daddy longlegs, as they're called in lots of parts of the world, they're most likely more closely related to mites and scorpions than they are to the spiders.
Oh, okay.
So these guys eat all sorts of things. Some of them prey on insects and other arthropods. Others eat plants and eat fungi or eat decaying organic matter on forest floors and things. So they're found in almost every environment on Earth. And unlike most arthropods, and certainly unlike spiders, they can eat solid food. So spiders have to sort of liquefy their food and then slurp it up. These guys can just grab whatever and chuck it in their gob. And,
they've got teeth.
Well, they don't have teeth. They just sort of have, weird arthropod digestive tracts which break it down. But they can eat solids, which is unusual for an arachnid. The distinguishing feature of their elongated limbs is a bit of a curiosity, though. Most spiders and other insects don't have ridiculously long legs. These creatures have got tiny little bodies and massively long legs, so it's been sort of a mystery for biology. Some of them do have short legs, but the majority have these same typical long, spindly, jointed legs, and they have more than they have multiple joints in their legs, so they can sort of wrap them around things as well. So they're quite a unique little creature. But biologists have wondered about the evolution of their long legs, especially as many species have specialized legs. So some of them have pincer-like legs at the front, which are used for feeding, so they can grab bits of food and eat them. Sort of a little bit like crabs or scorpions.
Yeah.
And others use their front legs as a kind of antennae for detecting prey or predators because they've got terrible eyesight.
Right. That's sort of like lobsters as well, right?
Yeah, and they've only got two eyes, so they can't actually form images. All they can do is kind of tell duck from light and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So they use their legs as antennae instead. So all these adaptations are very interesting, and others also have these things called pedipalps, which are also used for feeding, sort of like little shovels to push food into their face. But researchers from the University of Wisconsin in the US began looking into the genetics of the opiliones to find if they could understand the evolutionary development of the long legs and the genetic background to how they ended up with these. So these particular arachnids are very poorly studied, but despite being widespread, they're found on every continent except Antarctica. So they were flying blind for most of their work. There was little comparative information about their genetics available. And the main reason is they don't cause problems for humans. And this is why they're largely ignored. They don't bother any radar. Yeah, they don't bother any of our livestock. They're not pests of any of our crop plants. You know, they're just there in the environment doing their thing. So nobody really thought to have a close look at them until these researchers started to have a look at them. So they published their findings in the latest edition of the Proceedings of the Royal Society B on the 11th of August. They report they've successfully identified the gene complex responsible for the length and development of their long legs. And also, which is the weird bit, they've been able to alter them. So, by using a technique known as RNA interference, they were able to alter the development of the legs of several Phalangium opilio, which is related to the name of the daddy long-legged spider in Australia. That spider looks like this species, and they made them shorter.
So that's how they knew that the genes were coding
exactly
for
right.
the length of the leg.
They made a daddy short legs.
Oh.
So they induced them to also form pedipalps instead of their legs. So they totally changed the form of their legs by interfering with these genes. And in other cases, they got them to develop legs with no joints in them, so they couldn't bend their legs. But it was all this one gene complex that they were looking at, which was causing all of these changes in their legs. So it was relatively few genes responsible for a large number of macro physiological features of the actual arachnid. So their work is ongoing, but their identification and characterization of these genes allows them to better understand the evolutionary development of this species and of the order of these daddy longlegs, which, as I said, is a huge group of arachnids. And this will allow a more complete understanding of the evolutionary relationships between this group of arachnids and the rest of the eight-legged arthropods, and as well as pave the way for understanding similar interactive gene complexes in other animals. So they're hoping to be able to sort of apply this knowledge to looking at gene complexes in other species that control more than one aspect, daddy longlegs. But anyone who happens to be overseas and sees a daddy longlegs, just don't call it a spider, man.
that's all we have time for on another episode of Lost in Science. But before we finish up on this week's episode, this is a timely reminder that from August 14 to August 22, it is, of course, National Science Week, Australia's national celebration of all things science and technology. And if you haven't had a chance to check out what is happening in your local community for National Science Week, do yourself a favour and head to scienceweek.net.au. You can find out what is happening close by and also a whole world of activities happening online. It is great. It's probably not the Science Week we all expected, given how the majority of the country is in lockdown. But even if you are stuck at home, on your own, in a couple, with a family, with your dog or your cat, there are so many ways to get involved in Science Week. They've got virtual tours, webcasts, talks, do-it-yourself and do-it-at-home experiments, quizzes, and of course citizen science, something I love and is close to my heart. And about as many different types of science as you can imagine: space and astronomy, sustainability, material science, health and medical, of course very topical, energy and climate science, and agriculture. So there really is something for everyone for Science Week. In fact, one event I'm really looking forward to is hearing the story of how a research group who normally develops solar cells rose to the COVID challenge and pivoted from solar cell development to developing component parts of COVID-19 tests. It's a national... Lost in Science is recorded on the lands of the Kulin Nation, normally in the studios of 3CR, with the support of the Community Broadcasting Foundation and broadcast across Australia on the Community Radio Network. If you would like to get in touch with us, we would love to hear from you. We love an email. You can find us at lostinsci@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter, where we are Lost in Science 1, or on Facebook, where we are Lost in Science on 3CR. Or just tune in wherever you heard us this week, again next week, when Claire, Chris and Stu get lost in science.
Thanks for listening to a 3CR podcast. 3CR is an independent community radio station based in Melbourne, Australia. We need your financial support to keep going. Go to www.3cr.org.au for more information and to donate online.